If we pay people, say, $1,000 per month, now companies will pay people more because they're not just benefiting off other people's bad situations. So there's two streams of more money going to a person, from the government and from businesses. Where's all that money coming from, though?
Two biggest problems with this. Number one, the illusion is that the money just has to come from somewhere and then it's gone. The best dollar in the American economy is the dollar of the average American, because it gets spent over and over and over again. That's what creates economic movement, mobility.
Okay.
That's something that people forget. So the flip side to that is, to pay for about a $1,500 UBI, you would need to generate about $5 trillion in tax revenue. Sounds like a big number. All this money moves in our economy. Our economy is $20.5 trillion, or at least that's what it was in like 2019. I think it's up to like 22 trillion or something now. If you don't think we have the ability to tax 20% of all the money that moves in a given year in the United States and then redistribute it, you're just not thinking big enough. One way that you could do this is called a value-added tax, which is a better form of a consumption tax rather than it just being a sales tax. Let's say you take something out of the earth or mine something out of the earth and you turn it into a raw good, iron. When I sell the iron at a profit to the steel mill, that is going to get taxed at that level for all the value that got added to it, the profits that were earned from selling that, at like 10%. And then the steel mill turns it into parts for a car, right? They go sell it to the car manufacturer, and whatever they get on top of that gets taxed at 10%. And we start taxing the consumption. So we tax the money where it moves and where it moves the most, the raw production of the money. That gets complicated, but what this kind of means is virtually every product in society gets taxed at about 10%. Value-added tax. I would encourage people to look that up because it's better than a sales tax. The problem with a sales tax is it comes from regular people at a much higher percentage. But when you do it as a value-added tax, it taxes corporations a lot more than regular people.
So you've brought in two things here. You've brought in, if we pay people money per month, say $1,000 per month, now companies will pay people more because they're not just benefiting off other people's bad situations.
Right.
So there's two streams of more money going to a person, from the government and from businesses. Where's all that money coming from, though? Like,
so
is that just coming out the other end of the person's paycheck and taxes?
Two biggest problems with this.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, the illusion is that the money just has to come from somewhere and then it's gone. The best dollar in the American economy is the dollar of the average American, because it gets spent over and over and over again. That's what creates economic movement, mobility.
Okay.
And that's something that people forget. I now am getting an extra, adjusted for inflation, like especially after COVID, like really this should be at least $1,500 a month. So let's say it's $1,500 because your rent's gone up, your everything's gone up. So $1,500. Okay. So now that I'm good, I've got a spare $500. I'm going to go do that car repair that I never thought about doing before. And then I take that $500 and I go in and I pay the car shop. And then because I did my brakes, the guy who works there also was able to negotiate a higher wage from his employer. They get paid for a lot more brake jobs. There's more demand. Now he takes that $500 and he goes and does something that he's wanted to do for a while, like buy something new or whatever. And that money in normal people's hands gets circulated over and over again. The worst dollars in the American economy is the 80% of wealth that literally just sits in the bank accounts of the wealthiest Americans. It does nothing. It grows. Right? It's invested, it's in bonds or whatever, but it just sits there. It's not mobile. So it's not producing economic flourishing. It's just static money. That's the first part. So these dollars, we get a lot of them back.
Let's assume
they create jobs.
Let's assume we remove that money out of the billionaire's bank account, that static money.
Yeah.
To say that we could just remove that like we removed, I feel like there's something wrong with that argument, because that feels like saying I could just remove a piece out of the Jenga tower and the tower won't collapse. Like, what happens if we actually move that money?
Yeah, I'm not arguing to take that money.
Okay.
I don't actually think a wealth tax is the best plan.
Okay.
I think it's a good option. I think but it's not the best option.
Okay.
I was only doing that to contrast the idea that this money that we'd be giving to everybody, when you give it to normal people, we go and spend it. So it doesn't just disappear. It stays in the economy. It gets recycled over and over again. It creates economic mobility. How do we get the money? There are two big ways. I personally think a tax on land. And people kind of laugh at first, but hear me out. This comes back to private property rights, and I think I can make this argument if you want to go there. Private property rights are made up, just like all your rights are made up. We declared it, we wrote it down on a piece of paper and had it. Well, the second your country collapses, those rights go away. We have to collectively agree that we have rights, and then we have to enforce, protect those rights. Mm-hmm. Property rights is probably one of the shakiest ones, because just the idea that somebody can go put 4 stakes in the ground and say, this is mine and the rest of you have to stay off of it. Okay, what are you giving me in return, buddy? You're putting a imposition on me that I can't do anything with that land. You're taking away potential land that I could share and borrow and use with you. Are you paying me anything in return to do that? Are you doing anything in return? And so the idea of a land tax is it would balance that out from a fairness perspective. If the more land you own, you're going to have to do something productive or economically useful or viable with that land to justify it back to the rest of us.
Makes sense.
And that's how we can extract that through a tax. And you could claw a lot of money that way. The other one...
Does that not exist with property taxes yet?
So we have property taxes, but... let's be honest, most of the taxes are done in such a way, most of the land in this country is like corporate land now. Whether it's a corporate farm or a giant building or a piece of an office building or something like all of the land that's worth money is owned by a corporation. And that's the corporations don't pay it.
You're saying that the 1 acre plots that people have for their house is an insignificant amount.
Comparatively.
Okay. Yeah. Fair.
Yep. Comparatively.
Okay.
So the flip side to that is all this money moves in our economy. Our economy is $20.5 trillion, or at least that's what it was in 2019. I think it's up to 22 trillion or something now.
Okay.
To pay for about a $1,500 UBI, you would need to generate about $5 trillion in tax revenue. Sounds like a big number. If you don't think we have the ability to tax 20% of all the money that moves in a given year in the United States and then redistribute it, you're just not thinking big enough. You're just not having an imagination. One way that you could do this is called a value-added tax, which is a better form of a consumption tax rather than it just being a sales tax. You essentially, let's say you take something out of the earth or mine something out of the earth and you turn it into a raw good, right? Iron. Okay. For when I sell the iron at a profit to the steel mill, that is going to get taxed at that level for all the value that got added to it, the profits that were earned from selling that at 10%. And then when the steel mill turns it into, I don't know, a car, whatever, or the parts for a car, right? They go sell it to the car manufacturer, and whatever they get on top of that gets taxed at 10%. And we start taxing the consumption. So we tax the money where it moves and where it moves the most, the raw production of the money. That gets complicated, but what this kind of means is virtually every product in society gets taxed at about 10%. Okay, good.
Okay.
The other thing you could do.
Okay, so you were saying a 10% tax on everything, every
Value-added
single
tax.
profit made.
Yeah, and I would encourage people to look that up because it's better than a sales tax. It means a lot more. The problem with a sales tax is it comes from regular people at a much higher percentage. But when you do it as a value-added tax, it taxes corporations a lot more than regular people.
So my question is, if sales tax is more, if we're extracting literally more money on a sales tax, how does a value added tax like produce more money to give back?
No. So a sales tax won't produce more. The criticism of a sales tax is that in terms of as a percentage of your income, it disproportionately comes out of the cost of regular people way more.
Okay.
Right? And a value added tax, will claw that back from the corporations. Now you could say, well, they'll still translate all those costs back down to the consumer at the end of the day. Well, maybe, but we also just gave all the consumers a lot more buying power and a lot more choices with their dollars.
Yeah, they're not.
So there
they're
might
not
be a lot
forced
more
to take the bad hand of the companies dealing it to them.
Exactly, because they're in a better position. Yep. And so all of this is to try and tip the scales back the other way. And the important one that people don't think about, and this is another place where we have the money, we have a lot of the money, is our government's already ridiculously inflated budget in a number of different areas. Number one, on military spending, right? Like, we have an insanely huge military budget. It's heading towards $1 trillion a year. We spend 20 times more than the next closest country. I could go down all the list. We don't need to do that. And everybody in the world can see that most of it is wasteful. We can have to do better with the dollars that the government is taking in. Another one is, if we're rolling into this new UBI, there are some other cash subsidy programs like direct cash welfare, food assistance, right, that could be rolled into this. Now, if you're going to do that, the number needs to be higher. I don't think you want to take somebody on food stamps and say, well, I'm giving you $1,500 a month now, so you should be fine. I'm taking your food stamps away. That's not right. That's not what we should do.
Yeah.
But if we rolled all that in together, and now let's say it's $2,000, so we roll cash welfare, food welfare into this, and it's $2,000. $2,000's about reasonable for a person of what they need every month to get started. It's not going to get you a nice life, but it will get you. You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. And the administration cost of all of those programs is absurdly high. Because what do we have to do? The government has to spend money, time, and energy investigating to make sure you're worthy enough of our handout. That's what it means to have a means-tested welfare program. It says you have to go prove to somebody every so often, and there's got to be multiple workers that get hired for that. And it's a terrible job for them. It doesn't bring them any meaning or joy. They don't want to investigate hardworking people who are just trying to, get their life into a better place and need a handout. They don't want to invade these people's privacies. But that's what we've decided. We think we're justified in doing that. You have to prove to us that you're worthy. And so you could get rid of all of those administration costs.
You're saying if we just removed the people checking the people, it would be just more, because checking people is such a expensive cost, it would be more efficient just to give them the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. I don't think that sits very well with the part of people that say, well, you just shouldn't get money if you don't earn it yourself. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
But I'm telling those people that they're going to get the check too, and they deserve it.
Right.
This is because here's the framing. 54% of all stocks are owned by the top 1%. You're not getting your fair ownership in being part of the world's largest economy. You are systematically, by forces outside of your control, being taken away from it. You're being separated from the means of production, separated from the means of ownership. And that's being put upon you. And I'm saying you, as an American citizen, deserves your fair share of the pot of gold that we have in this country. And so does everyone else.